Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated on February 24, 2026, that a nuclear agreement with the United States is within reach, but only if diplomacy is given priority. He added that Tehran sees a historic opportunity to strike an unprecedented agreement that addresses mutual concerns and achieves mutual interests, and that Iran will enter the next round of talks with complete honesty and good faith, and a determination to achieve a fair and equitable deal in the shortest possible time. Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Takhtravanchi echoed the message, saying Iran is ready to take all necessary steps and will do whatever it takes to reach an agreement as soon as possible. This announcement came just 48 hours before the third round of indirect nuclear negotiations scheduled for tomorrow, February 26, 2026, in Geneva. The talks are mediated by Oman and involve the US side, led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, meeting the Iranian delegation. These are not fully direct face-to-face sessions between presidents or foreign ministers, but they represent the closest high-level engagement between the two sides in this cycle, building on earlier rounds held in Muscat on February 6th and in Geneva on February 17th. The timing is driven by acute pressure on both sides. The United States has carried out a major military buildup in the region, including dispatching a second aircraft carrier and assembling what officials describe as the largest concentration of US warplanes and tankers in the Middle East in decades. President Trump has repeatedly warned that if no deal materializes, bad things will happen, while in his recent State of the Union address he said his preference is diplomacy, but he will never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. This follows US and Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in June 2025 that Washington claims obliterated key parts of the program. For Iran, the motivation is equally clear: avoid further military confrontation while securing relief from crippling sanctions that have devastated its economy. Araghchi has stressed repeatedly that Iran under no circumstances seeks nuclear weapons and has every right to peaceful nuclear technology, including uranium enrichment on its own soil. Iranian officials have floated compromise ideas in recent weeks, including shipping half of its highly enriched uranium stockpile abroad, diluting much of the rest, and exploring a regional enrichment consortium, all in exchange for full sanctions removal and formal US recognition of Iran's enrichment rights. How the talks are progressing right now is a mix of cautious optimism from Tehran and hard-edged realism from Washington. The previous two rounds produced some alignment on broad principles, but left the core sticking points unresolved: the future of Iran's enrichment program, the timeline and verification of any sanctions relief, and whether the deal will be limited to the nuclear file or eventually address Iran's ballistic missiles and regional activities. US red lines, as publicly stated by Trump and his envoys, center on zero enrichment capability that could lead to a bomb. Iran views any demand to abandon enrichment entirely as a non-starter and a matter of national dignity. Leaks suggest both sides are quietly exploring limited token enrichment for civilian medical purposes, or a phased multi-stage approach that starts with nuclear restraints and moves to other issues later. On the ground, the atmosphere remains tense but not yet explosive. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has conducted defensive drills in the south, while US forces continue to reinforce positions around the Gulf. Oil markets are watching closely. Any breakdown could send prices spiking if the Strait of Hormuz comes under threat. Inside Iran, public sentiment is divided between fear of war and hope that these talks might finally deliver economic relief after years of hardship, protests, and currency collapse. If a deal is reached in the coming weeks or months, the consequences would be significant. Iran would regain access to frozen assets and oil export markets, easing domestic pressure on the government and potentially stabilizing the region. The United States would claim a diplomatic victory that avoids another Middle East war while achieving stronger safeguards than the 2015 JCPOA. Israel and Gulf partners would likely express deep skepticism and demand ironclad verification, possibly straining US alliances in the short term. If the Geneva round stalls or collapses, the risks escalate quickly. Trump has signaled a short window for progress, and further US or Israeli military action remains on the table. That could trigger Iranian retaliation through proxies or direct strikes on US bases, close the Strait of Hormuz temporarily, and send global energy prices soaring. Longer term, failure would accelerate Iran's nuclear advances, deepen its alignment with Russia and China, and lock in a cycle of sanctions and confrontation for years. Oman has been an effective, discreet mediator throughout. European powers and even some Gulf states are quietly encouraging a deal to prevent wider conflict. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has given Araghchi room to negotiate, but maintains ultimate veto power and has publicly rejected any deal that undermines Iranian sovereignty. On the US side, the unusual involvement of Jared Kushner alongside Steve Witkoff suggests Trump is treating this as a legacy-defining issue, blending personal diplomacy with hard power.